1 p.m. Thursday, July 11th, here in Seoul.
And these are the top stories at this hour. South Korea makes all-round diplomatic efforts to tackle Japan's export trade curbs against the nation. Seoul's top security and economic officials are in Washington to draw possible solutions to Japan's trade measures with their U.S. counterparts.
A South Korean lawmaker shows evidence that proves Japanese firms smuggled items to North Korea, including a material subject to Tokyo's export curbs. The claim comes after Tokyo accused Seoul of such UN sanctions violations.
South Korea's defense ministry rejects media reports that had sparked alarm at the prospect of Japan getting involved on the Korean peninsula militarily.
And there's only a day to go before the FINA World Aquatics Championships kick off in Gwangju. We take a look at how organizers are preparing for the event, as well as what to expect. NEWSCENTER begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea and hello to others watching from around the world. Welcome to Arirang News Center. I'm Han-dan in Seoul.
And I'm Noaram. Thank you as always for joining us this evening. Our top story tonight, amid the country's escalating trade tensions with Japan, senior South Korean officials are in Washington to discuss the matter with their U.S. counterparts.
Meanwhile, working-level trade talks between South Korea and Japan have been scheduled to take place tomorrow. Our Kim Hae-sung starts us off.
South Korea's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong arrived in Washington on Wednesday local time to meet U.S. officials and discuss trade and security issues.
I'm here as there are many issues to discuss with White House officials and lawmakers.
일본의 그 대한 수출 규제 때문에 지금 우리가 미국이 좀 중재를 요청한다 이런 역할들.
That issue will certainly be discussed, most definitely.
Kim's trip came a day after South Korean President Moon Jae-in urged Japan to refrain from leading the situation to a dead end and respond to Seoul's efforts to resolve the matter diplomatically. Tokyo imposed trade sanctions on key high-tech materials to South Korea last week, and Seoul and Tokyo clashed at the WTO over the export curbs earlier this week. Seoul's top diplomat for bilateral economic affairs, Kim Hee-sang, is also in Washington to meet with U.S. officials, including Mark Napper, the State Department's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Korea and Japan. He is expected to outline the potential impact of Tokyo's controversial trade measures and the possible spillover effect on the global supply chain of electronic products. South Korea's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee is also expected to meet with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer next week. The Trade Ministry also confirmed Thursday that working-level trade officials from South Korea and Japan will meet Friday afternoon in Tokyo to discuss Japan's trade restrictions. It added that it will call on Japan to elaborate on its allegations that South Korea illegally exported items such as hydrogen fluoride to the north, a substance which can be used in chemical weapons. The ministry said the claims are groundless, adding that South Korea has strong trade controls and that those materials were not shipped to any countries under UN sanctions. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign minister spoke on the phone with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo about recent Seoul-Tokyo tensions. The minister voiced concerns, while Pompeo promised close communication with Washington's two core Asian allies. Our Kim Mo-gyun tells us more.
Speaking on the phone to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa expressed concern over Japan's new export restrictions, claiming that they not only harm South Korean companies, but will also disrupt the global supply chain. Kang said the measures are not helpful to cooperative relations between Seoul and Tokyo or to trilateral ties with Washington. Furthermore, she said they could hurt American companies and the global trade order. In response, Pompeo said he understands Seoul's position and promised to work to strengthen America's diplomatic communication with its two core Asian allies. But an expert on diplomacy says it's unlikely that Washington would actively step in, nor side with either country. Instead, it would try to stop things from getting worse.
The possibility of the U.S. siding with either one of its allies is low because it could threaten Washington's strategic interests in Asia. And in past cases, such as Seoul and Tokyo's territorial disputes over Dokdo, Washington has been a passive mediator.
Meanwhile, during their 15-minute phone call, Kang and Pompeo also touched on North Korea's denuclearization. They agreed that last month's historic trilateral summit at the DMZ between the leaders of the two Koreas and the U.S. built a foundation for concrete talks on denuclearization, and they agreed to continue working to achieve their shared goal of complete denuclearization and lasting peace on the Korean peninsula. The two decided to continue their dialogue next month on the sidelines of the ASEAN Regional Forum in Thailand. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
While Japan claims South Korea smuggled materials to North Korea that could be used to make chemical weapons, a South Korean lawmaker today unveiled an official data that rather shows Japan's funneling of items into North Korea. Her Kim Min-ji reports.
It appears that Japanese companies may have smuggled strategic items to North Korea. Citing data from Japan's Center for Information on Security Trade Control, South Korean lawmaker Ha Tae-kyung of the minor opposition Bareunmirae Party said Japanese authorities found that strategic items were shipped to the north illegally by Japanese firms. The agency is a non-governmental organization in Japan that tracks data on export controls. Among the strategic items is hydrogen fluoride, one of the three materials Japan is now restricting South Korea's access to.
Between 1996 and 2013, there were over 30 cases of illegal exports. Among those are items used in North Korea's nuclear development or in the production of chemical weapons.
The data obtained by Ha showed that in 1996, a North Korean ship was found carrying 50 kilograms of sodium fluoride at a port in Osaka, while another vessel was found with 50 kilograms of hydrofluoric acid at a port in Kobe. The latest revelation comes as Tokyo accuses Seoul of smuggling hydrogen fluoride to the north, which would be a violation of UN Security Council sanctions. Japan claims that's partly why it's restricting those exports, but Seoul sees it as a retaliation for a court ruling that calls on Japanese firms to compensate the people they forced to work for them during wartime.
Japan is making the preposterous claim that hydrogen fluoride imported by South Korea may have been funneled to North Korea. But the data show it's been Japanese firms that have been smuggling this material to the north.
During a parliamentary interpellation session on Thursday, the government again flatly denied the claims.
The Japanese media continue to step up attacks on South Korea. Have we ever smuggled hydrogen fluoride to North Korea?
We have not. And even when firms attempted to, the South Korean authorities have caught them and have been working to implement sanctions under the UN sanctions regime. It's a shame that Japan is making claims on inaccurate reports and data.
The Prime Minister added that it's extremely dangerous for the Japanese government to rationalize its economic retaliation by linking it to security issues, saying that it could hurt the security system between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Many economists agree that Japan's export restrictions will hurt both South Korea and Japan, though to different degrees. And a projection from one research institute suggests the export curbs might knock 2 or 3% off of Korea's GDP. Our Ko Ryun-hee explains.
Speaking Wednesday at a seminar on the impact of Japan's export restrictions, a senior research fellow from the Korea Economic Research Institute said they'll end up doing more harm than good to both economies. Researcher Cho Kyung-yup said that if Korean companies suffer a 30% drop in semiconductor-related supplies, South Korea's annual GDP would drop by around 2.2%. The three materials affected by the export curbs are photoresist, fluorinated polyamides, and hydrogen fluoride, necessary to make semiconductors or displays. Analysts have been saying the move will hurt Korea's economy, around 1/5 of whose exports last year were chips. And Cho forecast that Japan's GDP would also edge down 0.04%. But if Seoul were to retaliate by restricting exports on chips and chip components to Tokyo, things would likely get worse. South Korea's GDP would slump at least by 3%, Cho estimates, and Japan's by around 1.8%. Cho points out that if Seoul does retaliate in a major way, it stands to lose more than Japan, which would replace Korean firms with suppliers in Japan or China. To ease the tensions, analysts at the seminar recommended solving the problem diplomatically rather than by economic attrition. And such conversations between the two governments, they said, need to start as soon as possible. 고르니, Arirang News.
There are growing calls here in South Korea to localize many high-technology products that are sourced from Japan in light of the two countries' growing trade friction. In part 2 of our 3-part special series on Japan's export curbs against South Korea, our Kim Da-mi tells us about the number of options that Seoul has on hand to achieve material and technological independence.
South Korea produced its first homegrown fluorinated polyamides nearly 15 years ago. Fluorinated polyamides used for making foldable displays in Samsung and LG smartphones is one of the 3 key materials being targeted by Japan's export curbs. However, the lack of investment in the materials industry, regulations, and heavy reliance on Japan have hindered efforts to produce them indigenously. 6 out of 10 local SMEs say they won't be able to last 6 months without Japanese imports, and almost half of them have no countermeasures of any kind. Finding a way to become self-sufficient in the supply of these materials is the ideal solution, but the localization process won't be completed overnight.
It will take around 5 years to develop our own materials. That's even when we have the fundamental base for production. With no background research and resources, it will take at least 10 years.
Some experts have pointed out that localization is not the answer given the large amount of required investment and resources, as well as South Korea's small footprint in the global market. South Korea accounts for a paltry 4% share of the global semiconductor equipment market, far short of the government's 13% goal.
We cannot produce and localize everything because of financial and human resource limitations. We should work on what we can and bring in what we cannot make ourselves from other countries. That's the International Division of Labor.
Instead, South Korea should play to its strengths and further develop its advanced semiconductor technology. While the country should continue with its localization efforts in the long run, experts say a diplomatic solution with Japan must be arrived at first. Given the two countries' intricate economic ties, public pressure is growing in South Korea and Japan to reach a speedy resolution to the trade conflict before it can manifest itself in the long-term damage. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Seoul's defense ministry has rejected speculation that Japan might get a role in the UN command, a move that could lead to a Japanese military presence on the peninsula. If that were true, it would worsen what is already frayed tensions between Seoul and Tokyo. Kim Ji-yeon explains.
South Korea's defense ministry denied suspicions that Japan could be militarily involved if an armed conflict broke out on the Korean peninsula. The ministry's deputy spokesperson said Thursday if Japan or any other country hopes to participate as a sending state of the United Nations command, they would have to seek the South Korean Defense Ministry's approval. The ministry said there have been no discussions or considerations with the U.S. on whether Japan could be an official member. In accordance to the UN Security Council resolutions that were adopted in 1950, the UNC can ask for contributions from its 16 sending states, excluding South Korea and the U.S. Also, the ministry said it told Germany it strongly objected sending a German officer to the UNC, and with that, plans to send an officer had been shelved. The ministry stressed any country that hopes to dispatch officers to the UNC needs Seoul's approval, citing the UNC's role of defending South Korea in adherence to the armistice agreement.
Regarding this case, there have been no prior consultations with or consent from our government. And as a country directly involved, we've strongly objected to the plan.
The remarks follow speculation that the U.S.-led UNC is reportedly seeking to include Japan in the states that would be involved militarily if an armed conflict broke out on the Korean peninsula, raising suspicions it could help expand Japan's self-defense forces. South Korean media cited multiple government sources as saying the U.S. has been looking to expand the UNC's role in the region, using troops and equipment from UNC's rear base in Japan. Also, for the first time, U.S. forces Korea in an annual publication called Strategic Digest have referred to Japan's military involvement, saying that UN command, quote, continues to ensure the support and force flow through Japan that would be necessary in times of crisis. That contrasts with last year's report in which Japan wasn't mentioned by name. The lack of response from the UNSC is fueling speculation that it's part of moves to have the UN forces stay in the country, even after a peace agreement is signed to replace the existing armistice. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, U.S. forces in South Korea have for the first time acknowledged publicly that North Korea's Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile can reach any part of the continental United States. Oh Jung-hee has more.
The first official assessment from U.S. forces in South Korea that the North has a missile that can reach any part of the U.S. mainland, the Hwasong-15 ICBM. USFK released this year's Strategic Digest on Thursday. It says North Korea has 3 types of ICBMs, the Hwasong-13, 14, and 15, and of these, the Hwasong-15 flies nearly 13,000 kilometers, putting any part of the continental U.S. in range. The Hwasong-14, the report says, flies roughly 10,000 kilometers and can reach most of U.S. mainland. The U.S. military said last year saw a much welcome detente on the Korean peninsula, and North Korea showed it was willing to negotiate and engage in dialogue. But the report was also cautious, noting that tensions have thawed in the past as well, and it's still hard to tell which direction Kim Jong-un will go. U.S. forces noted that joint drills with South Korea have been scaled down, but it's unclear whether the North will reciprocate with sincerity towards the diplomatic process and restrain its own conventional forces. Though Kim Jong-un has ordered some key nuclear missile sites dismantled, the report said there's a lot of work to do to achieve final and fully verified denuclearization. It claimed that Kim has not made policy decisions that'll lead to sanctions relief or foreign investment. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now officially the North's head of state. Pyongyang's propaganda website 내 나라 revealed earlier today North Korea's new constitution that was revised back in April. It says that the chairman of the State Affairs Commission, Kim Jong-un, is the supreme leader that, quote, represents the North. The North used to have a separate figurehead leader to represent the regime, a position held by the head of the North Korean Supreme People's Assembly. But through the constitutional revision, Pyongyang limited the role of the parliament leader to a few symbolic diplomatic functions and anointed Kim as the leader representing the North in and outside the regime. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is less convinced Washington would take military action, believing U.S. President Donald Trump is, quote, different. That's according to Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Intelligence and Research, Ellen McCarthy. In an interview with CBS News, McCarthy said she can't pinpoint whether Kim likes or dislikes Trump, but he may be viewing Trump differently from past American presidents. She added that based on her team's understanding of the media and what Kim has said, the North Korean leader believes the U.S. is looking for regime change, but not through military action. South Korea's foreign ministry says the UN Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee recently approved Seoul's request to destroy a ship being held in South Korea for illegal ship-to-ship transfers of oil products to the north. The ship has been held in Pyeongtaek since December 2017, and Seoul asked for the UN's approval to scrap the vessel in mid-May. This is the first time that a ship is being disposed of for violating UN sanctions. The ministry says the case will send a clear message to the international community that such violations can result in such measures. Shifting gears now, and the wait is almost over as Gwangju is preparing to host the first global swimming event in South Korea on Friday. And to cover all the glories and joys that some 2,600 athletes from over 190 countries will showcase during the 17-day event, some 300 foreigners from the global news outlets have stepped their foot in the country's southern city with great excitement. Won Jung-hwan reports.
The time is now for top-tier swimmers to show the world what they're made of. Staff members inside the International Broadcasting Center are busy setting up their equipment and making other preparations for the highly anticipated summer sporting event, which begins with the opening ceremony on Friday. Carefully checking their equipment and running systems diagnostics, people working inside the IBC have an important role to play, the task of sending all the vivid images during the championships out to the global audience. The over 60 global broadcasters that have set up shop in Gwangju are looking forward to covering the event with the help of South Korea's high-speed 5G infrastructure.
We are here in South Korea, in total 26 people between technicians and special correspondent, reporter, etc. I know that South Korea is well known for the technology, and so I'm looking forward especially to this.
Just outside the IBC, there is a media press center where foreign reporters, photographers, and technicians are busy covering every little detail of Gwangju for the benefit of viewers worldwide. When asked about what they're looking most forward to, they said the upcoming edition of the championships will be a fierce competition between world-class swimmers.
The most important thing is this is the last World Championships before the Olympics, Tokyo Olympics next year. So all the athletes must come here and prove the situation about themselves and about the opponents.
I think we're going to see some world records getting broken here, and I think what you're going to see is who potentially is going to shine for next year's Olympics. So this plays a big role in
And expectations were not limited only to the swimming competition itself.
So other than enjoying this beautiful new facility where the expansion took place and the outdoor swimming pools, I think the biggest thing I ever recommended to them is make sure they have some Korean food, which I think is known as Hanguk umchik here locally.
Whether it's the new world records, amazing facilities, or the delicious Korean food, visitors will get an experience to remember at the biggest competition in the FINA's history. Jong-un, Arirang News, Gwangju.
Despite ongoing government efforts to revitalize Korea's jobs market, the youth unemployment rate jumped 1.4 percentage points on year in June. Some experts say South Korea should take a leaf out of other countries' books to tackle the problem. Seoul explains.
Many countries around the world have adopted an array of policies to foster youth employment, seen as a major pillar of growth that sustains the nation's economy. Germany's dual vocational and educational training programs focus on aligning classroom instructions with real labor market demand. The system puts the young students through 2 to 4 year apprenticeships, split evenly between classroom instruction at a vocational school and job training at a participating company. Students can learn about 350 different occupations ranging from automotive engineering to finance and receive salaries as soon as they start training. Employers, on the other hand, can save recruitment costs as they can hire graduates of the programs who are already familiar with the company's workflow. The program is so popular that about 60% of high school graduates in Germany apply for the program each year. Australia's Youth Job Path program is meant to create 30,000 internships a year between 2017 to 2020 for job seekers between 17 and 24 years old. Government subsidies cover the intern salaries as well as insurance and other benefits. Employers also receive $1,000 per each intern they take on and become eligible to receive up to $10,000 when they're hired as full-time workers. As for Japan, the nation has put an array of measures under a policy called the revitalization strategy. The scheme encourages young entrepreneurs by providing easy access to financing through crowdfunding, low-interest loan, and working capital. In addition, it assigns personal assistants to help job seekers find employment and provide them with necessary information, job referrals, and counseling. Korea could take note of these case studies from abroad in hopes of devising effective job creation policies to alleviate its chronic youth unemployment issue. Seoul, Arirang News.
South Korea's Supreme Court has ruled that the Justice Ministry was wrong more than a decade and a half ago to permanently ban a former K-pop star from entering the country. That's Yoo Sung-jun, who was widely considered a traitor for getting American citizenship just before he was supposed to start his military service. The court's ruling means the singer can appeal the Justice Ministry's decision and possibly set his foot back in Korea again. Our Lee Min-sun has the story.
South Korea's Supreme Court has ruled that it's illegal for the nation's immigration service to refuse an entry visa for Korean-American singer Yoo Sung-jun, also known as Steve Yoo. Yoo debuted in Korea in 1997 and was one of the country's most popular celebrities, but found himself embroiled in a huge controversy in 2002 for evading mandatory military service after he obtained U.S. citizenship. The Ministry of Justice subsequently prohibited Yoo from entering Korea, citing Article 11 of the Immigration Act. It states that the Justice Ministry can ban the entry of anyone it deems highly likely to engage in activities that could undermine Korea's national interest or public security. It's been 17 years since Yoo last set foot on Korean soil, but the former star has been pleading with the authorities to allow him to return to Korea and resume his career. His visa application was turned down in 2015, prompting him to file a lawsuit against the Korean government. However, military service is a very sensitive issue in Korea, and public sentiments regarding Yoo remain cold. A recent public opinion survey conducted this month showed that 7 out of 10 respondents were opposed to allowing Yoo's entry to the country. Although the court ruling today does not immediately lift his travel ban, it will allow Yoo to appeal the previous decision from the Justice Ministry in hopes of securing his long-awaited return home. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Most of South Korea's 50 richest people have seen their wealth decline this year due to trade woes and other economic factors. According to Forbes, 37 of them saw their net worth take a hit compared to last year. This dragged down their combined net worth by 17% to $110 billion. Samsung Electronics chairman Lee Gun-hee is still the wealthiest man in the country with $16.8 billion, but it's down nearly $4 billion compared to last year. He's followed by Celltrion's Seo Jong-jin and Nexon's Kim Jong-ju. The Seoul Metropolitan Government is implementing measures to keep people cool this summer, especially the vulnerable. The city advises people to stay indoors when heatwave warnings or alerts are issued and to make use of the capital's 26 cooling shelters. The shelters have air conditioning units, shower rooms and even TVs. 3 mobile bath vehicles for homeless people will also operate in 5 areas. Nurses will also provide daily checkups on the homeless, the elderly and the disabled. Korean food is making further inroads into U.S. supermarkets at the 2019 LA K-Food Fair. The Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation signed an MOU at the fair this week with Asian food vendor Gwangju to sell Korean products to American chains, including Kroger and Costco. Gwangju supplies 90 brands to the U.S. market from 10 Asian countries. Based on the MOU, stores will be selling Korean seaweed, noodles and strawberries. The U.S. women's national football team celebrated their World Cup victory in New York on Wednesday, joined by fans tossing confetti and chanting equal pay. Their victory cast fresh light on the women's team's fight for equal pay with their male counterparts. If the U.S. men's team won the World Cup, each player would receive 10 times as much as their female counterparts. The women's team has been fighting for equal pay for months now and filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Soccer Federation in March over the matter. That has been your 3-minute news flash. It is that time now to take a look at some of Arirang's digital media content.
And today we have another episode of Koreator, where foreigners share their love for Korea.
What's up, everyone? So today I'm here again and I'm going to make a video regarding foreigners living in Korea. Cinderella! Let's go! It's because of curiosity. I was super curious regarding the Korean culture. Korean drama, K-pop are now famous in my country. So I was like very curious regarding this. And of course, I really like the Korea, so this is the reason why I came here in Korea. When I came here, in the airport, I was so shocked with their internet. When you just connect to public Wi-Fi, still so fast. In my country, it's not that fast because we're just like improving these days. So that's very shocking experience for me. Next is their transportation. The bus here is actually so good. They have like a specific number for each buses. In the first time, you will be shocked because it's so big, you don't know how to transfer. In the first time, it's always like that. But when you used to ride the subway or the buses or the taxis, everything was going so fine. Okay, so the next shocking experience for me, food. You know, ultak. It's like the spicy one food here in Korea, and I was like, oh, it's so shocking experience because they told me like, oh, you cannot live in Korea if you cannot eat spicy food. I cannot do this anymore. The weather. In my country, it's all year summer. But what I like here in Korea is they have like 4 weather, which is they have like summer, they have like winter, they have autumn, they have also spring, which is actually so memorable because every weather will change. And you see the difference within the clothes. You have to wear some clothes, specific clothes for each weather, which is you will use different kinds of clothes, not always like same thing. So that's actually the memorable thing here in Korea as my own experience. What I want is to give some information regarding those Filipino or those other foreigners living in Korea. It's actually not so easy living in Korea. If you are new here and you don't have any families here, but it's actually definitely fine here. Everything was fine. Koreans are good. Yeah, you have to learn their languages, which is actually a plus if you are going here. So yeah, I hope I learn a lot of Korean languages while living here in Korea. So next time I will talk in Korean, or maybe I will talk in my own native language to give some information. So anyway guys, I think this is the end of this video. I hope I helped you and I give you some information and ideas as a foreigner living in Korea. So until here, my name is Shakri, and bye-bye!
The monsoon rains have cleared as the cloud front made its way south, but rain is still falling in some regions across the country.
Let's get more on the weather from our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Now, with the rain clearing up, Seoul and parts of the nation were left with overcast skies. However, the low pressure front is lingering to bring more rain in the far northern regions of the country and parts of the eastern coast as well. Now, these areas have already received a substantial amount of monsoon rain, so take cover as there could be landslides. And Friday will be a cloudy one, but as it's Chobok tomorrow, a day referred to as the beginning of the hottest day of the summer. Now we will see a 5-degree increase compared to today, and meanwhile, Beijing is scorching hot, swept by numerous heat waves. And the start of the day is similar though, with most places waking up to between 19 to 22 degrees Celsius tomorrow, and Seoul waking up to 20 degrees. Thankfully, the mercury in most places will stay under 30-degree mark. Seoul will top out to 28 degrees, and Busan and Jeju are cooler and also very windy at 27 degrees. For those of you wondering about the weekend, isolated showers are expected at times, so make sure to stay up to date with the latest forecast if you're planning outside. Now, next week, we have more sunny days in the capital. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That will do it for this edition of Arirang News. Thank you, as always, for watching.
News in Depth is next.